Welcome to Washington in Focus Daily. It is Monday, June 29th of 2026. I'm Carlene Johnson, the Center Square Washington's state government reporter. And in today's episode, we were anxiously watching this morning when the U.S. Supreme Court came out with more rulings, but we did not get the rulings that we're watching most closely for. And we know now that one of those cases is coming down tomorrow because Justice Roberts said that tomorrow, Tuesday, is going to be the last day that they're going to issue any ruling. So there are several cases outstanding, but the one here in Washington state we are most closely watching has to do with transgender athletes and transgender biological boys being allowed to be in girls' locker rooms and bathrooms and play in sport competitions. We're watching for that, and that's again coming down on Tuesday. There was another decision today from the Supreme Court granting cert. That means they're going to hear a case that is specific to Washington. That also has to do with some transgender and parental rights. So that was exciting to find out today. They'll take that up. We'll share details coming up in today's episode. And then Washington's first automatic inflation indexed tax hike kicks in on Wednesday, July the 1st. This is going to be 2% increase every July 1. It's not going to be necessarily tied to any specific project or anything else. It's just going to go up. That has to do with the law that was passed in 2025. Some reflections on that coming up in today's episode. Sound Transit ridership is up this month, in large part because of World Cup and people that are in town without cars riding some of the trains. So we'll bring you some of that, but it needs to be balanced with what isn't happening with Sound Transit and their recent report about projects being scaled back. And then finally, how about that Washington State booth at America's great fair that's happening in the nation's capital? Turns out Washington is one of a small handful of states that really don't even have a booth at America's great state fair. Why is that? Well, these are all blue states that decided not to have a booth and exhibit. So we have U.S. Congressman Michael Baumgardner with a very interesting post on X, and some of the comments from folks we'll share in today's episode. All right, the U.S. Supreme Court is set to hand down a highly anticipated ruling. We know it's coming tomorrow, and we have folks that are impacted by this that are going to be giving us exclusive reaction right after that ruling comes down on Tuesday morning. And this has to do with states' bans targeting transgender athletes. And the decision likely coming in here originates from two cases, one in Idaho and one in West Virginia. There was a case from Washington State that the high court decided not to take that one. They took these other two states' appeals, basically, of saying, why are biological boys allowed to compete against girls? This is a Title IX violation. That's the crux of the issue. But again, it has a great impact here in the state of Washington. Of course, we have an initiative coming to the ballot this fall dealing with this very issue. So this is what's coming down on Tuesday morning. 7 a.m. Washington time is when these cases come down. And so we'll be able, certainly in tomorrow's episode of Washington in Focus Daily, to have a thorough scope of reaction to this ruling that's coming down. I would say for this period of rulings coming down, other than, voting rights, there were some gun rights cases that came out last week that were highly anticipated, but it's probably not, it shouldn't be a secret that the last day of rulings that come out from the nation's high court are usually the ones that are most controversial and perhaps have divided the 9 justices on the court. It will be very interesting to see how this comes out on Tuesday morning. And we also got word today from the state Supreme Court that they have agreed and granted cert. And that means, in other words, they've agreed to take arguments in a case called International Partners for Ethical Care Incorporated versus Ferguson. Of course, that's Governor Bob Ferguson. And this case challenges a Washington state law that actually allows state-run shelters to hide minors from their parents. Seems pretty far fetched, but this is actually what's been happening. This means that, say, a young person goes to school and talks with their counselor and they are undergoing some gender confusion. And they say, I can't share this with my parents. They will object and they would allow me to proceed with gender affirming medical care. Well, in the state of Washington and some other states, the school is then allowed to basically turn that child over. Then that child can be placed in a home, a foster parent, a shelter care for 90 days at a time, and they can actually start to receive medical care. And not only is the parent of this minor child not allowed to know what kind of gender affirming care their child is undergoing, they don't even get to know where their child is located. Basically, some people have likened it to kidnapping. And that is what has happened. And my colleague Andrew Rice, who covered the U.S. Supreme Court, or covers the U.S. Supreme Court, I should say, today wrote up an article in the Washington state case. And he explained the issues at play here in the arguments the court will consider. He said the High Court will examine three laws challenged in the suit, one permitting minors who are at least 13 years old, that seems young, to receive outpatient treatment without parental consent. Another law requires overnight shelters to reach out to the state instead of parents if a child runs away to seek protected health care, including gender affirming care. And the third law allows children to stay in shelters for up to 90 days. Now, it will likely be this fall or possibly early 2027 when the US Supreme Court takes up these arguments, and then it would be likely a year from now, late June of 2027 before we get a decision. But I want to share with you that I heard a heartbreaking case of a family directly impacted by this here in the state of Washington. That was during the legislative session. Back on February 3rd, Republicans held a couple of listening sessions for the two initiatives that we're going to be voting on this fall, the two thus far certified for the fall ballot. And those have to do with the restoration of parental rights and transgender athletes in girls' sports. And there was a woman who came forward to testify in a hearing, and it was absolutely heartbreaking. She hadn't seen her daughter at that point for many, many months. I think it's been well over a year now, because her daughter, who already had some mental health issues, when they came to a school district here in Washington and enrolled, her daughter spoke with staff, or I don't, it might have been a school counselor, administrators at the school, who then helped facilitate her to go to a judge to say then the judge basically says, you parents don't go along with what your daughter wants to do with her gender affirming medical care. So your rights are at least temporarily terminated. We're going to place her in shelter care. You don't get to know what's happening to her body and where she's being placed. Now, mind you, in the state of Washington, there are a number of shelters, foster care facilities that fully embrace this gender affirming care ideology. And those are the places that are taking these kids temporarily. So it was heartbreaking to hear from this mother, desperate to find out where her daughter was located, and the state saying, we're protecting her. So this case is again going to be heard now, probably this fall or early next year by the US Supreme Court. All right, let's get into gas taxes, because on Wednesday here in the state of Washington, your state level gas taxes are going up again. This is an automatic inflation indexed July 1 tax hike. And this is based on a bill that passed in 2025 and was signed into law by Governor Ferguson. Um, it's only 1.1 cents, so it doesn't seem like a lot. But that brings the total per gallon excise tax to 56.5 cents. We've got, of course, a lot of other taxes. We've got federal taxes. We've got our CCA, our Climate Commitment Act taxes that are in effect. We pay the third highest gas taxes in the nation. So I spoke with Mountain States Policy Center's Transportation Policy Fellow, Bob Pinchue about this. He has some details about what will hit you come Wednesday.
So last year, elected officials, and it was signed by the governor, passed a bill, a transportation funding bill that included an automatic increase in gas taxes. So typically in the past, when elected officials wanted to build a bunch of projects. They then put out a project list and then also, the taxes necessary to fund that list. Instead, what's different about the gas tax increase this year is that it's automatic. There are no new projects that they have to, sell to the voters to agree to a tax increase. It's now a tax that it will be occurring every single year to just automatically raise the fuel taxes that Washingtonians pay every time they fill up.
Now, again, this increased state gas tax comes on top of the federal gas tax that we pay of 18.4 cents and carbon fees that are paid by us drivers for the Climate Commitment Act. That's about 52 cents right now, I'm told. Supporters of this, of course, say that we need to adjust this regularly for inflation. But opponents say, if we're going to increase the state gas tax, it's supposed to only go to fund projects. Show me what the projects are and let voters decide whether they want to raise their gas taxes for that. Because despite the high gas taxes that we pay here in the state of Washington, our highways and bridges, if you're a driver, I don't have to tell you, are in a state of disrepair. In fact, according to the most recent report from the Reason Foundation, who studies all the states as far as their repair and cost effectiveness, what you're paying in, what you're getting out, bang for your buck on gas taxes, we're near the very bottom of the barrel.
Washington, a recent report from the Reason Foundation, they put this report out for more than 2 decades, analyzes, different states, how their approach to transportation spending and the results from that. And Washington continues to rank pretty low in terms of spending and of road quality. And so Washington ranked 48th in the country. So not too good of results for Washington. The other point is that the new one of the new mechanisms here, this automatic increase, doesn't have that accountability built into it that you kind of mentioned. Typically taxpayers can go, hey, I'm going to be paying more, so will I see the results on the road that reflect those higher prices, and they can judge whether or not they support it or don't support it. With this new legislation, it's an automatic increase. So that accountability measure is sort of absent, and that's one of the things that we've highlighted that's wrong, or that's potentially troublesome about these automatic increases is that there's a little bit less accountability than we've seen in the past.
Now, according to AAA Washington, the average gas price today in the state of Washington for unleaded is $5.19 a gallon. It's $5.58 in King County. And our poor friends up in the San Juans always pay the most in the state. They're beholden because they are islands. So once the gas gets there, you're kind of out of luck as far as, going to the cheaper gas down the street. I don't think they even have any Walmarts or any other Costco's. Do they have Costco's in the islands? I really doubt they do. That's where the rest of us drive around to find cheaper gas, right? That is going to continue to be an issue. And also interesting, and I'm going to be writing an article about this either later this week or maybe because it's the holiday shortened week, it'll be next week. But the Eastern Washington and Southwest Washington communities that are driving into our neighboring states to get gas instead of filling it up here. I would do it too. If I lived in Vancouver and say worked in Portland, or I worked in Spokane and I drive across the border into Idaho to fill up. I looked this up. Now, Idaho's gas prices today are $4.72 a gallon. And if you can drive into Idaho and fill up, it's even cheaper, $4.11 per gallon on average today, again, according to AAA gas. And we've got school districts in Eastern Washington that are now fueling their entire fleet, their school buses, up for diesel across the borderline into Idaho. So we raise the gas price here, but are we getting any increased tax revenue from that? Maybe not, because more folks then are going to drive across state lines where it's cheaper if it's also convenient for them to do so. So that's something to keep in mind. Policy planners might want to keep that in mind. So, in keeping with our transportation theme, Sound Transit, they are actually having a good month. I'll give them credit where credit is due. It's in large part because it's World Cup and we've got summer tourists that are visiting Seattle. So on June 19th, that was the day that USA Soccer played Australia. That was an exciting match to be sure. Sound Transit and King County Metro carried over 500,000 passengers on that day alone on their trains, buses, and their boats. Because, of course, you got the King County water taxi, which was hugely popular this time of year, even without World Cup travelers in town. But when the crowds are gone and people, it's just regular commuters driving or riding, I should say, the buses and the trains, what's ridership really look like? Now, again, to Sound Transit's credit, when Linwood Link opened last year, a lot of people started riding that because there's a ton of people that live in Snohomish County that work in, Seattle and greater Seattle area. And so getting on that train instead of slogging through what is sometimes a 2-hour commute from Linwood into Seattle, that makes sense for people. Saving money, saving wear and tear on their car. I get that. And that makes total sense to me. And that link is actually proving to be fairly successful. But other links, like the most recent link extension, which is in the community where I live in Federal Way, doesn't look like there's a heck of a lot of people riding that train as yet. Maybe it'll catch on. At this point, it hasn't really caught on. So here is Washington Policy Center's Transportation Center Director Charles Prestrud kind of talking about whether or not you ride the train, you're paying for it.
The average household in the Sound Transit Tasking District pays about $1,700 per year in taxes to Sound Transit. On top of that, people who live in King County also paying taxes to Metro. That's maybe another $750 a year, maybe a little more. If you live in the city of Seattle, you're paying additional taxes on top of that to subsidize transit that goes through the city of Seattle and that they pay to the transit agencies. So we're paying a very high price, and transit is very heavily subsidized in the Puget Sound region, much more so than almost anywhere else in the country. But what hasn't gotten much attention, if you look at the Puget Sound Regional Council's new 2050 plan, which is usually based on very optimistic forecasts, it shows that in the year 2050, transit will have a mode share of 4.7%, which means that more than 95% of the trips will not be on transit.
And while more people are certainly using Link, the future of the system is not looking bright. You may recall some of my colleagues have written about this extensively on our Center Square Washington page. It was back in May. Sound Transit came forward and said we have a projected 34 billion, yes, that's with a B, $1 billion deficit. And so they are voting to defer some of their Sound Transit 3 promised projects, including the Ballard Link extension between Seattle Center and Ballard. Is it just going to be scaled back, postponed, perhaps canceled entirely? Some of the other projects are already years delayed. When Federal Way finally opened in December, just this last December of 2026, I think it was 2.5 years behind. Some of that was blamed on COVID. Some of it was blamed on the concrete workers union strike. So there's other factors that go into those delays. But 34 billion in the hole, and taxpayers, as you heard Charles from WPC say, we are paying a heck of a lot for it. In fact, I heard another stat I want to share with you from Washington Policy Center's Paul Guppy over the weekend in one of his podcasts that I was watching. He said that for everything we've paid into Sound Transit and will continue, we're obligated to pay many years, decades out, right, for all of these projects. You could give every person, man, woman, child in the state of Washington an $18,000 check. I found that to be a pretty remarkable statistic. I mean, for crying out loud, for that price, you could go buy yourself a new used car and not be reliant on the transit system. But anyway, that's a topic for another day. Okay, finally, the Great American State Fair is underway in the nation's capital. This is a 16-day sort of national exposition that's taking place on the National Mall, a place I've never been, but is on my bucket list for sure. But there are a handful of states, including Washington State, that don't have an exhibition set up. So I don't know how they have it set up, if it's going down, states, how we're located across the country, or, when we were adopted into the Union. But Washington's exhibition booth is downright pathetic and embarrassing. I mean, I saw this in an ex post from U.S. Congressman from Washington, Michael Baumgartner. Now, I did reach out to the office of Governor Bob Ferguson to inquire. As we're recording this podcast today, I've not received a response. Of course, if I get that, we'll bring you the update in tomorrow's episode. But a couple of the people commenting to the post were not pleased. Many, as I said, were just calling it, shameful and embarrassing. One person posted, "How petty and vindictive are Democrats going to get that we can't even celebrate 250 years of the greatest country on earth? There were Democrats in those 250 years. Can't they even celebrate them?" Was one of the comments I found to be interesting, but there were hundreds of comments to that ex post from Congressman Baumgartner. And yeah, it's kind of sad that Washington couldn't be showcased for all the amazing things that we are and the beauty that we are here. And many people in the nation have never been to Washington because we're located so far away from the East Coast and even middle America. So that's unfortunate, but the rest of us know that there are good things about this state we'd like to celebrate, and certainly want to celebrate America this week in all of our episodes of Washington in Focus Daily. So that's a wrap on today's episode. Thank you, as always, for watching. Join us again for tomorrow. The last day of the month is upon us tomorrow. Have a great day.